Welcome, everybody. We're just going to give it a minute or so while people join and connect to audio. Um, and then we will get going. We have a whole lot to get through today, a lot of great information. We just want to make sure everybody has access to it. So we're just going to give it, a minute or so, and then we'll get going. Okay, fantastic. So people will probably be joining as we get started here, but that's okay. Like I said, we have a whole lot of information to get to. I want to make sure we do get to it all. So we're going to get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Tonight we are talking specifically to single member LLCs. Whether you are a business owner already, you have an LLC that's already registered, whether it's a dream of yours, or whether you are somebody who assists people with registering or filing taxes for LLCs. I have a whole bunch of information for you today. We're going to be talking through the process to prepare and register an LLC, what you're going to be needing to do every year with the state to maintain that business registration. And then the Division of Taxation here in Rhode Island is going to be giving you a presentation all about taxes for LLCs, to include corporate taxes, income taxes, sales taxes, all taxes that you want to know about, we're going to discuss. A couple of housekeeping items before we get going here. Just gonna mute. A couple housekeeping items. We are recording. You'll see the little red blinking light here. We're recording because we are going to provide a copy of this recording to everybody who is on the call today. Also, anybody who registered but is not here, you're also going to get a recording. We will very likely also post this recording for public consumption on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel where this will be published, so you can return to it at a later date. That said, the chat is open. You are absolutely welcome to use the chat at any time. If you have questions for me, you have questions for the Secretary of State's office, if you have questions for the Rhode Island Division of Taxation, the chat is open. Have a colleague of mine here, Gabby Bannon, who's going to be helping out in the chat. And the Rhode Island Division of Taxation has a whole team assembled here that's going to help answer your questions as we go as well. That said, I understand that sometimes your questions might be very specific to your situation. It may deal with some personal information, particularly when we're dealing with taxes. So while you can ask any question you like in the chat, all of your questions might not be answered out loud since we are recording for the general public. So you'll get an answer. We'll make sure we get you a response in the chat. We just might not always be answering your questions out loud for the recording, for your own personal privacy and sanity, okay? Another point of order here, if you are interested in using closed captioning to digest this workshop, you are absolutely welcome to do that. There is an option either on the top or the bottom of your screen that says CC. You just have to click that button and then you can enable closed captioning and set the details for that however it makes the most sense for you. Okay. My name is Kristen Cordero. I am a Deputy Director here in the Business Services Division of the Rhode Island Department of State under Secretary of State Greg Amore. We are doing this workshop in partnership with the Rhode Island Division of Taxation. We are two separate state agencies that really work in tandem when it comes to LLC registration and maintenance. So we're talking all about that today. You're going to be hearing from me about my office. And you are going to be hearing, sorry, thank you, Gabby. I appreciate that. We're going to be talking all about what you're going to need to do with both of our offices here. I want to explain what we do. And what we are to you when you have an LLC is we are the state's business registry. So if you have or are going to have an LLC in the state of Rhode Island, you will be coming to the Rhode Island Secretary of State's office in order to register that LLC. You may have already done this. You may be doing it in the future. You may have done it years ago and you're thinking about doing it again. We are the only shop in town when it comes to registering an LLC. We are the place to go. That said, we have developed a lot of resources to make that process less confusing, a little easier for you. So if you want to go it alone, if you want to do it yourself, you absolutely can. We try to make it as easy as we possibly can for you. I do want to go over very briefly just how to get in touch with our office. I should also mention that I am not using PowerPoint slides tonight. I'm using our website as a backdrop for this conversation. This is sos.ri.gov. You can visit the website at any time. All of the things I'm going to be showing you today are available on the website, so you can access them at your convenience whenever you like. How to get in touch with us? You are absolutely welcome to come visit our offices. We are located at 148 West River Street in Providence. We are right near the main post office on Charles Street. There's free parking surrounding our building completely. We have accessible space. We also are on a RIPTA bus line, so you can get to us by a variety of different ways to be transported here. You do not need an appointment to come in to our office. If you want to come in and file a document or talk to a member of our team, you can just show up and do that. We're open from 8:30 to 4:30. You show up, you will be able to access a member of our team to help you with your question. You are also welcome to call us. The phone number to reach us is 401-222-3040. When you call, you're going to get an answer from a real live human being within about a minute or so. They can help walk you through filing. They can help explain what things mean. They can answer any questions you might have about your LLC. Finally, you can email us. The email address to reach us is corporations@sos.ri.gov. We have staff who monitor that email address all throughout the day. You usually will get a response within the same business day, usually within a couple of hours when you email us. The last thing that we offer that may be of use to you is something that we call virtual office hours. And this is an opportunity for you to make an appointment on a Tuesday or a Thursday morning, any week of the year, to meet virtually for free with a member of our team. You can meet with us for 4 different topics: starting a business, starting a nonprofit, reinstating a revoked business, or closing a business. Again, appointments are free. They happen every Tuesday and Thursday morning. So if you're interested in just signing on to a virtual meeting to chat with one of our team members for 15, 20 minutes about questions you have about your business, please feel free to make an appointment. That is what they are there for. Okay, perfect. The next thing that I want to show you is something that, as a business owner in the state, or as somebody who helps business owners in the state, you will very, very likely use. I hope you do use it because it's very useful for you. And that is our corporate database. And you saw when I clicked on this corporate database, I didn't have to log in. I didn't have to prove that I'm a business owner. I didn't have to, give any credentials. All I did was click a button. That is because this database is available for free to the public 24/7. And what this database contains is a record of every document ever filed by a business in the state of Rhode Island that's ever registered with us. We have records dating back to the 1700s in this database. And this means that you have free, full access to every document you ever file with our office for your LLC. What does that mean for you? It means that you can confirm that things were filed. It means you can very easily download a file stamped copy of anything that you have filed with us for free. So if you're trying to open a bank account, you need a copy of your articles of organization, you can download that on your own time. It can be 3 a.m., it does not matter. And you can bring that or send that to your bank to open that bank account. You do not have to wait for a certified copy of something. One thing to note when we're talking about the corporate database is it's really important that you understand everything that you file with the Secretary of State's office for your business is going to be 100% permanent public record. We do not collect personal information about you, the business owner. We don't collect ownership information at all, actually. So when you're registering your LLC, you are providing some information, including an address for the LLC, but you are never indicating that you are the owner in the corporate record. We're going to talk a little bit about addresses and what that might look like for you, but it is really important that you understand, unlike really personal private things like taxes, which you do not want people having public access to, the corporate database and all of the documents you file with us are going to be public permanently. You really want to make sure when you're filing documents for your LLC, whether it's to first create your LLC or to maintain that LLC for the future, that you are comfortable with everything you're putting on there and that you understand what it is you are filling out. We beg you not to guess. If you have a question about anything on a form that you're filing with our office, please ask. If you don't know what something means, please ask us. We can absolutely explain to you what certain terms mean, what your options are. We can never give you legal advice. We can't tell you what to put on the form, but we can certainly help you understand what things mean so that you can make an informed decision when you're filling out any of these forms, understanding that whatever you give us is going to be publicly available. So when you're in this corporate database, all you need to do is just search for the name of your business. Okay, if I put in ABC, every business that has ABC in the name comes up. I'm going to find whatever one is mine, okay? And this is not my real business, just a random one I chose. And I have all of the information about this business here. I can also view, as I said, a PDF copy of every document ever filed by this business since the day that it first started. And that will be the same for you and your business. I encourage you to use this corporate database to your advantage. Make sure that when you're filing something, it appears in the database because that's the only way you know that it has been accepted. Okay. All right. Another thing that I want to mention to you is tonight we're kind of doing an abridged version of a workshop that we offer several times a month called Small Business Basics. If you access our training calendar, you can find all of the upcoming dates for all trainings that we do. This is the one I'm talking about here. We just had one last night. In Small Business Basics, we go in detail through the steps to register, a lot of things to consider when you're planning to start a business, when you're considering which business structure you want, right? I'm assuming the folks on this call are either thinking about an LLC or have already registered an LLC, but we talk about other business structures as well. We talk about basic tax implications, we talk about maintenance, and we answer your questions as we go. So if you're looking for something that's a little longer, something that's a little more interactive with our office, but still deals with questions about your LLC, you are welcome to join any upcoming Small Business Basics classes. We'd be happy to have you. Okay. I'm going to show you some of the resources that we have on our website for small businesses. This applies to all LLCs, including single member LLCs. Many of our resources on our website are available in Spanish. Our team has worked really hard to translate the resources that we have into Spanish. If you are interested in digesting the information that I'm looking at here in Spanish, all you need to do is click the little green button you see here, and it will bring you to all of the Spanish language pages that we have published, with many more to come as we go. Okay. We have 4 basic buckets of information here for businesses. Planning has a wealth of information about things that you should consider when you're first starting out. I'm not going to take you through that section today. There's a lot of really important information. I encourage you to check it out, but in the interest of time, we're skipping over that today. There is one thing that I want to show you in here that might be useful to you. and that is our structures chart. So again, I'm assuming you're all interested in LLCs because that's probably why you're here. The name of the workshop that we're doing kind of lends itself to the idea that you're interested in an LLC. But do you know what an LLC is? Have you ever thought through what that actually means, right? We do have resources here that help explain the difference between various business structures. This is an LLC, or a limited liability company, is one such structure. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, I don't see single member LLC here anywhere, right? That should be listed here. We're talking about single member LLCs. Well, it's really interesting that you ask that, dear reader, because a single member LLC is just an LLC, okay? Single member is a type of tax structure. We'll talk about this, but an LLC is treated as an LLC by the state, uh, no matter how many members it has. A member in LLC speak means an owner. So a single member LLC just means that you have registered a limited liability company with one owner and that you are taxed that way. Leo is going to talk about some what that means, right? What that tax structure actually means for you in terms of income taxes. So we'll hold that off for a little later, but it's really important to understand that a single member LLC is not a separate type of business. A single member LLC is an LLC, and it is required to do all of the same things that all other LLCs are required to do. You should have governing documents like an operating agreement that lay out the details of how your business is operated, who owns it. Remember, I said that we don't collect ownership information, right? So how do you prove that you own an LLC? Well, you do so by putting your name down as the member in the operating agreement. An operating agreement is something that you're not going to be filing with our office or with any other state agency. It's a legally binding document that you are keeping in the personal records of your LLC. You may present it to a bank when you're opening a bank account, but it's not something that you're going to be sharing to the general public. The operating agreement, really important to have. Again, it is a legally binding document. If you have questions about whether or not your operating agreement is sufficient or what should go in there, you should really seek the services of a qualified professional like an attorney. There are lots of organizations in the state that offer free or low-cost support to help you access that kind of assistance. If you are not willing or cannot afford to hire an attorney at the start of your business, which is perfectly understandable. Okay. All right. I want to move on from that to talk to you about what it looks like to register an LLC in the state of Rhode Island. We have here on our website step-by-step instructions for exactly how to do that, and I'm going to go through this with you. We're going to talk through some concepts. Again, if you have questions while I am talking, feel free to throw those in the chat. I'm kind of going to run through, and then I'll be happy to answer any questions that I missed after I am done here. So the first thing you need to do when you are ready to register a new LLC is to make a couple of decisions, to think about some decisions that you need to make. Number one, you need to have a name, right? The name of your LLC does have to be unique. It cannot be too similar to another name that we already have in our corporate database. Remember when I showed you that corporate database, all I needed to do was type in a couple letters to pull up every business that had those letters in it. That's the kind of search you can be doing when you're trying to determine if your name is available, the name that you want to use. We are also happy to do that search for you. All you need to do is reach out to us either by phone or by email, ask us to clear the name you want to use, and we will happily do that for you. So you need to make sure you have a name that is unique, again, that's not already in use, which means once you register your LLC, as long as you keep that registration active, nobody else is going to be able to register a business that has a name too similar to the one that you have. So there's built-in name protection there as long as you keep your registration active. Really important that you do so. If you allow your registration to lapse, you allow your business to get revoked, you lose that protection. You lose all of the benefits of the LLC that you have already prepared. So you want to make sure you're not just kind of filing a form and then forgetting about it. There are going to be things you're going to have to focus on every year, and we're going to talk about what those look like in just a little bit. The next decision that you have to make is who your registered agent is going to be. And a registered agent is required for all businesses registered with the Secretary of State's office. This is a requirement whether you are a business based here in Rhode Island or whether your business exists elsewhere and is also doing business here in Rhode Island. If you have a business that is registered with the Secretary of State's office, you have to have an up-to-date registered agent on file. And what on earth is a registered agent? A registered agent is simply a person or a business that your LLC has designated to receive legal service of process on behalf of the LLC. Worst case scenario, what that means is if somebody sues your LLC, this is the door that the constable is going to knock on to serve a copy of that legal complaint on your LLC. This is also the address where the state sends notices. So we send notices to this address when your annual filing is due. It's important to understand that anybody can serve as your LLC's registered agent as long as they meet two criteria. They have to have a Rhode Island street address. It cannot be a P.O. box. It cannot be a UPS store or a virtual business address. And whomever you name has to be available at that address during normal business hours. Can you be your own registered agent? Absolutely, as long as you meet those criteria. So if you work from home, let's say, and you're running your business as a little bit of a side hustle, but you have a 9 to 5 that you do from home, and you want to serve as your own registered agent, you can absolutely do that. However, you'd have to list your home address. Can you do that? Sure. You just want to make sure that you're comfortable doing that, okay? If you're not comfortable doing that, and you want to put a different address. Let's say you work from home, but you own a property down the street. If you're not available at that address during normal business hours, you cannot use that as your registered agent address. So what happens if you do work from home, you don't want that address to be public? What do? You should choose somebody else to serve as your registered agent. You can choose anyone you like as long as they meet those two criteria. So it can be a spouse, it can be a parent, it can be an attorney, an accountant, a best friend, it could be a company that you hire to do this for you. All of those are fair game as long as whomever you are designated meets those two requirements. They have a Rhode Island street address, they are available at that address during normal business hours. Very important to understand that your registered agent address can be totally different from your principal place of business, which means the place you conduct business from or the mailing address for your business. For that address, that could be anything. Your principal office can be a P.O. box. It can be a virtual business, right? It can be almost anything you choose. It can even be in another state or another country. The registered agent address has that requirement that it be a Rhode Island street address, and you do have to make sure you keep this information up to date. It's really legally important for your LLC. Once you've made those decisions, the next step is to file your LLC, to register. And you're going to do that by filing a form with our office that is called Articles of Organization. The fee to file the form is $150. I'll show you what it looks like. I'll show you the online filing form that you'll see if you're going to register online. This is the form. I'll go over a couple of spots with you. This first section is the name of your LLC. I just mentioned that your name has to be unique, right? You need to make sure it's not already in use. Another thing to make sure that you're keeping track of, The name you indicate here in Article 1 has to include a corporate ending, which means it's not okay for you to just put Kristen's Enterprises for your business name. If you are registering an LLC, you're legally obligated to write your name here, your legal name of your entity, as Kristen's Enterprises LLC or Kristen's Enterprises Limited Liability Company. You must have that ending on your corporate name. And the name you put here is going to be the legal name of your business. That is the name you'll use when you're applying for an EIN. That's the name you will put on tax returns. That's the legal name you will put on contracts. What the name that you put here is the legal name of your business, and it has to include LLC or limited liability company. The next section is your registered agent information. So we just went over this, right? It's going to be a Rhode Island street address, and the person that you list here has to be available at that address during normal business hours. The next section is where you you make a decision, a public decision about how you want your LLC to be taxed. And there's 3 different options here. Leo is going to go into what this actually means, but the 3 basic options you see are this funky one called disregarded as an entity separate from its member. This is the default classification for a single member LLC. An LLC that has more than 1 member, more than 1 owner, is default classification as a partnership for tax purposes. Or you can opt to be taxed as a corporation where your LLC is held completely separate from the members. You're going to file totally separate tax returns and pay corporate taxes. Again, we're really talking to single member LLCs tonight, so very likely you'll be selecting disregarded as an entity separate from its member. But if you have questions about the implications of this choice, you should always seek the help of a professional who can help you understand what that's going to mean for you. Okay. The next section here is the mailing address or the principal office of the LLC. Again, it can be anything. It can be a PO box. In fact, on this form, you don't even have to put anything. If you're not sure where your business is going to be located yet, you do not have to fill in this section. When you file your first annual report with our office, you will fill in what your principal office is. But if you don't know what it is at the time you first form, you don't have to worry about filling this out. Okay, you have some time to figure it out. Once you get to the bottom of the form, there's this section that trips some folks up, and that is deciding how you want your LLC to be managed. And there are 2 options here. There's something called member managed, which means the owners of the LLC. So in your case, you, right? The owner of your single member LLC, you run the day-to-day affairs of the LLC. You do it all on your own. You haven't authorized anyone else to do it on your behalf. If that is the case for you, if you are going to be managing the day-to-day affairs, you will check members and you will move on. Because remember, a member means an owner, and we do not collect ownership information in this public record. That is going to be privately held in the records of the LLC. The other option is manager. And if you select manager, what you are saying is that the LLC has authorized somebody else or a couple of people to run the day-to-day affairs of the LLC. They can make financial decisions. They can make all sorts of important decisions about how your LLC is run because you have authorized them to do so. If that is how you want your structure to be, you'll check managers and then you'll indicate the name of whomever it is that you've appointed as a manager. You can choose whichever one of these makes the most sense to you. It's really important you understand what the 2 options are and what they mean. Okay, so remember, if you're going to be member managed, if you're doing it yourself, you're not authorizing anyone else to do it for you, click members and move on. Do not put your name here. Once you've gone through the rest of the form, this is just contact information for us to be able to get in touch with you should something need to be corrected on the form before we can accept it. You're going to digitally sign it, or if you're dealing with a paper form, you're going to physically sign it. You're going to hit submit. You're going to pay with a credit card online, or if you want to visit us or mail things in, you can pay by check or credit card at our public counter. And then within about a day, maybe two, probably about a day, we will have processed your application, your articles of organization. If everything was acceptable, if nothing needed to be updated, you will not get a confirmation from us, okay? The way that you confirm if your business has been filed or not is to go into that corporate database I showed you. Search the name of your business and see if it comes up. If it does, you know it was accepted. If you get an email from us, it means that your business or your application has some corrections that are required before we can accept it. It's also important to note that we're not going to take your money if we can't take your filing. So if you submit something to us, it is not fileable. You are going to get your filing and your fee back. We will only accept your fee and process your fee and keep it if we can also process your filing. Okay. All right. Getting close to passing the baton to Division of Taxation here, but bear with me for just a moment. The next step after you have registered your LLC, because remember, when you register an LLC, you're creating this corporate entity. It does not exist until you register it. Once you have done that, you now need to get an EIN. And it is required if you have an LLC that is registered that you have to get an EIN. EIN stands for Employer Identification Number, a bit of a misnomer because you do not have to be an employer. It can just be you. You don't have to hire somebody, but you do have to get an EIN. And essentially what this is a social security number to identify your LLC in lieu of your own personal social security number. Your bank is going to look for this EIN when they're opening a business bank account for your LLC. It is 100% free to apply for an EIN. The link to do so is right here, but you're going to go to irs.gov, right to the IRS. You're going to fill out a form to apply for this EIN, and you will almost instantly get an EIN assigned to you. Hang on to that, okay? There are ways that you can go back to the IRS and say, oh, I lost my EIN. It's going to take you a little time. It's going to take you a little bit of a headache. So when they issue that to you, make sure you keep a record of it, that you don't lose track of what your EIN is. Your EIN is unique to your business. Again, it's a way to identify your business. This is the number that you're going to be putting on, again, tax returns, right? You're going to be putting it on any legal documents where you need to identify your LLC. You will use the EIN that has been assigned to your business by the IRS. It is free to get one. If you Google get an EIN for my business, the first page of results are going to be businesses offering to get one on your behalf for a fee. While you certainly can pay someone to do this for you, you do not have to. You can do it yourself. Again, easy online form. You fill it out and you get almost instant response. The next step is to register with the Rhode Island Division of Taxation. So one of the things that I'm going to talk to you about in a minute is a little bit about your tax obligations and things that you need to do every year. You have tax obligations for your LLC no matter what, okay? Keep that in mind. I'm going to go into a little more detail, and then Leo's going to go into way more detail. But you will have to pay taxes for the LLC to the State Division of Taxation, the Rhode Island Division of Taxation, because you are a registered LLC. It is not based on whether or not you have actually used the LLC. It's not based on whether you ever opened a bank account or hired employees or made a profit. If you have registered an LLC, there are tax obligations for you automatically. Again, I'll talk about what that looks like in just a minute. The next thing that is important for you to understand is that there's a new federal requirement. Congress passed a new law back in 2021 that just took effect in January of 2024 that requires all LLCs that are registered with the state to also file a separate report with a federal agency called the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. The Financial Crimes Enforcement Network is charged with combating financial crimes. It's a great name for it, right? So they are trying to suss out money laundering and terrorist financing and other financial crimes. So the point of this federal legislation is to require all businesses to report who has substantial control over that business to the federal government. This report is required of you if you are registered with the state. There are some exceptions. 99% of businesses in the state of Rhode Island are going to have to file this report. Just like applying for an EIN, it is free. You're going to file this report directly at fincen.gov. There's 2 links right here. You can get to them. In terms of due dates, okay, we are in the first year of implementation for this, so the due dates are a little wild. If your LLC was first registered before January 1st, 2024, so let's say, for example, I registered my LLC in July 2023, I have a full year to comply with this requirement. So I can file my beneficial ownership report with FinCEN anytime before the end of the day on December 31st of 2024. If I am just registering my LLC today, I have 90 days from the date that I registered to file this report. There are penalties and consequences for not doing so. Again, it is free. It is a federal requirement. You are never going to be filing this information with our office or with any other state agency that requires you to file something with them. This is a particular filing just with the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network that you are required to do. Okay. We have a document here called a welcome packet for LLCs that I really encourage you to check out. I won't go through the whole thing with you today. We will include a link to it when we send the recording, but this has a whole bunch of extra information for your LLC. It has tools to keep you organized. It has contact information for state agencies and nonprofits that can help your business get set up and get started in a healthy way. It also has infographics and information and about things that we talked about today, things that we talk about in that small business basics course, but also extra stuff like branding and marketing and insurance and record keeping and financials. All of that stuff you can find in the welcome packet, and I very much encourage you to check it out, even if you haven't registered an LLC yet. It may pique your interest and make you think about something that you haven't thought of before. Okay, before I turn it over, I want to make clear that, like I said before, filing those articles of organization is how you set up your LLC, right? But it is not a set it and forget it kind of thing. There's actions that you are required to take every year to maintain your good standing with the state and to keep intact all of the protections that are afforded to you when you register an LLC. That personal liability protection, right? The reservation of your name. All of those things fall by the wayside if you do not perform the actions you see on the screen here. So there are 3 main things that you have to do every year to maintain your good standing status. The first is to file something called an annual report. And this is a document that you file with the Secretary of State's office every year. This is always going to be due between February 1st and May 1st, beginning the year after you first register. So if you first register today, your first annual report is going to be due beginning February of next year. If you first registered last year, your annual report is due now. Again, the filing periods between February 1st and May 1st. There's a $50 filing fee for this annual report. And the annual report itself, super simple. Okay, for LLCs, it is quite literally half a page. This is it. That's all it is. All you are doing on this annual report is you are reporting the name of your business, what you do, where you are located, and your signature. That's about it. You do not have to calculate what you have done in the previous year. You don't need to make a case for why you need to remain in business. It is a really simple reporting form that you have to file every year by law. We do send a courtesy mailing every year in January to remind you that this is due. That mailing is addressed to your registered agent. So again, keep that information up to date and make sure whomever you choose to serve as registered agent communicates with you really clearly and quickly so that you are aware of these requirements. If for some reason your registered agent isn't great at communicating with you or the courtesy notice gets lost in the mail, you are still required to file this form every year. So maybe calendar it, keep it as a reminder for yourself. It's really simple. You can do it online. It'll take you probably all of 3 or 4 minutes once you get going. And if you have questions about it, if you have questions about what something means, please feel free to reach out to us. Don't just guess. We are happy to help you through filing your first or your second or your 30th annual report. Just reach out. We're here to help. Okay. The other thing that you need to do every year with our office is to make sure you keep that registered agent information up to date. So this is the sort of thing where you don't have to file a document every year, but once a change is made, you need to notify us immediately. And you do so by filing a form. Okay, you can change two things. You can change who the person is that is serving as your registered agent, or you can change where they are located, or both. So if you have a registered agent that you trust and love, but they're moving, you file a form to change their address. If you are no longer happy with your registered agent or you need to choose a new one, you can file a form to change who it is and where they are. Just make sure you do this when you make the change, because not having an up-to-date registered agent is a reason for your business to fall out of good standing with the state. So when we send that courtesy notice to you in January, if it gets bounced back to us as undeliverable because you didn't update that information, revocation proceedings are going to start. You'll have a chance to fix it, but if you don't in time, then your business will be revoked. So make sure you stay on top of that, okay? And then the final thing that you have to make sure you do every year, and I will be really brief here because we have the experts on hand, is pay taxes. And the thing that's really important to understand, I mentioned it on that last page. If you have a registered LLC, you owe taxes, okay? In the state, we have something called a minimum corporate fee or a minimum annual fee that is owed to the Rhode Island Tax Administrator for all registered LLCs. This fee is owed regardless of when in the year you first registered. It's not prorated. It's also not tied to any income that you make. So if you register an LLC but don't actually start conducting business for 6, 8, 10 months, there is no grace period for that time that you weren't conducting business. When you register a business, you immediately have the right and the ability to be conducting business, and the assumption is that you are. This fee of $400 is going to be due at tax time every year. For a single member LLC, it's going to be due at the same time that your regular taxes are due. So April 15th or 17th on those strange years where it falls on a weekend. But you will be filing a separate tax return to pay this fee. And Leo's going to go into that. So I just want to make clear these 3 things you see on the screen here, you have to do every year, no matter what has happened during the year with your LLC. You may start out slow. You may not have made a profit. You may have taken a loss. You may have filed it and then not actually gotten off the ground yet. If you're registered, these maintenance requirements are mandatory. And it's also true that these requirements are mandatory for as long as you remain registered. So if you're no longer going to be using the LLC that you registered, it's really, really important that you take the proper steps to close that business. You're going to file documents with my office called articles of dissolution. You're going to file final tax returns. You want to tie up the bow and close the loop on this thing that you opened so that the liability for the annual reports and the taxes don't continue to pile on, plus interest and penalty fees. If you're no longer going to be using the LLC that you registered for whatever reason, I hope it's a good one, like you hit the lottery, right? You really want to make sure you take the steps to properly close that business. And we do have step-by-step instructions available on the website. Okay. That's what I wanted to go through with you today. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, check out the chat, and hand the mic over to Leo. Gabby, is there anything that I need to answer aloud before I do so?
Yes.
Okay.
So someone had a question about how long is the name protected for once the business is closed, which I wanted to kind of talk about the difference between being revoked and being closed, and then also maybe what you need to do to close, just real quick, with the difference between the two.
Sure, yeah. So your name of your LLC is protected for as long as your LLC remains in good standing. Good standing means that your business has not been revoked. Revocation is an administrative procedure that happens when you fail to do one of those things we just talked about. So those 3 requirements to maintain your LLC: file an annual report, pay that minimum corporate fee every year to the tax administrator, and maintain your registered office. If you don't do one of those 3 things, then your business stands the chance of being revoked, meaning you lose the protections and a lot of the benefits that you have from filing that LLC. You lose access to the courts. So you cannot file a lawsuit on behalf of the LLC. You can't, or you may find it very difficult to get any funding in the name of the LLC. You very likely are not going to be able to sell the business because you're going to have to prove that you are in good standing in order to do so. You also probably won't be able to sell any major assets of the LLC. So let's say you had property in an LLC, you kind of let it go by the wayside because you weren't doing anything with it, and now you're ready to sell that property. You have to fix the problem before you can do so. We have a page on our website, which I am happy to throw in the chat, that deals with the consequences of revocation. Revocation, again, it's an administrative action. It is involuntary. It means you didn't ask for this. It just kind of happened to you because you didn't do what you were supposed to do. This is totally separate from a dissolution, which means you proactively took the steps to file closing paperwork to say, I'm no longer using this thing. I don't want it to exist anymore. That is the proper way to do things. And if you fail to do so, if you just let it remain in a revoked state, it is not closed. It is just no longer in good standing. It continues to be responsible for those annual filings every year. There are penalties involved, there's interest involved. It is not the same thing as formally closing your business. So if you're interested in not only maintaining the protections that an LLC will afford you, making sure your name is protected, making sure you have personal liability protection, but you also want to make sure that you're not haunted by the ghosts of businesses past in the future. The proper thing to do is to make sure you file that dissolution paperwork with our office to close the loop on this entity that you have started. Is there anything else I need to cover aloud, Gabby?
Yeah, if let's say I accidentally put my home address as registered agent, I was unaware it was going to be public. Is there a way to get it completely stricken from the record, like it will never show ever again?
There is not. Good question. So as I said early on, everything you file with us is a permanent public record. So the PDF copy of what you filed with us is going to exist in perpetuity in that corporate database. However, when you update the information, you give us an updated address or an updated name of your registered agent. When somebody searches for your business, that's the first thing they're going to see. We're not going to have on your summary screen in that database any old information. It's only going to show the most updated information. So someone would really have to go digging in the record if they want to find that old address. But yeah, it is going to be permanently public. So like with all things you file with our office, make sure you are comfortable with that being part of the record.
Okay, and then the last question is, are you considered an employee as a single member LLC?
No, we got IRS answer on this the other day. So this is a kind of a nuanced question. There are ways to pay yourself as a single member LLC, and we'd be happy to share some information about that, about ways that you can pay yourself, but you actually can't hire yourself as an employee if you are a single member LLC. You can still make money, but you are not considered an employee automatically just because you do work for the LLC. Cool. Okay. I will continue to answer questions in the chat. We're going to keep things moving. I'm going to invite Leo to share his screen and unmute and take the stage. Continue to ask questions, and we will go from here. Take it away, Leo.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. We do have, as Kristen said, we do have a lot of information to cover. And we have a lot of slides for the Division of Taxation. We do have a PowerPoint presentation. As she mentioned, I do have members of the staff to help out with tonight to answer questions as we go along. I would caution you on some questions because we are going to cover a lot of material. So some of the questions that you have may automatically get answered as we're going through the material. So just keep that in mind. But certainly we want to answer any questions you have. That's why we're here. So there is a disclaimer on the screen. We are not providing tax or we're not intending to provide tax or legal advice. We do suggest you hire a tax preparer or a private attorney if you require that. But we are intending to provide some guidance and direction so that as a single member LLC, you know what your requirements are and how to move forward. So as I said, there's a lot we're going to cover. We are going to do a checklist as we go along so that you can see that where we are along the way and how much information we've given you. To start out, we're just going to cover a few basic slides about who the division is and why are we doing this? Why are we providing this information to you? So we do administer 58 different tax types with 223 full-time positions. We are the most significant revenue source for the general fund and for the state. In the last fiscal year, we collected over $5.2 billion in funds. That was not just all for the general fund. Some of it did go to cities and towns, and we'll talk a little bit about that later in our presentation. But part of the reason we're doing this is to meet one of our goals of our mission, and that is to foster voluntary compliance with the tax laws. How are we doing that? Why do we want to have voluntary compliance? Well, in all reality, every person who is a citizen in the state of Rhode Island is a taxpayer. Everything that we do, we want to do efficiently. And we want to be able to provide returns for your tax dollars. So to do that, it's less expensive and more efficient for taxpayers to voluntarily comply. We have a role in that, though. We have to provide clear instructions and provide education. We have to be accessible to you by phone and email to answer questions. And we have to optimize processes, including creating electronic means to file tax returns, so to help create that efficiency. What we really don't want to do is to get into more expensive means of compliance, which is litigation, collection action, and audits and investigation. They're all a part of what we have to do in order to stick with compliance, but they're not the ultimate and efficient way for us to do business. So instilling that voluntary compliance is by doing things like we're doing today. So who are we intending this presentation to be for? Certainly newer startup businesses with no experience with tax filing requirements. For individuals who are thinking thinking of starting a business, it's always good to get out in front of what your requirements are going to be. For some people who are already filing, you may already have a business and you just want to confirm your understanding or add to what you understand. And individuals who are guiding professionals. So those are all the groups that Kristen talked about in the beginning. Hopefully, at the end of this presentation, you'll be able to identify or understand the 5 concepts on the screen. And we're going to go through those individually and in pieces. But basically, we want you to understand the different characteristics of different entity types, the specific filing requirements of both a single member LLC and the single member of that LLC, filings and due dates that are required, and any other information and resources we can put that we have on our website. So I'm not going to go through all the characteristics that are here on the screen for what an LLC is, but just to highlight a few of them, Kristen spoke early on that when we talk about a member of an LLC, that's the owners of the LLC. So in the case of a single member LLC, it's the single owner, right? No matter what type of LLC, the entity is separate from its member. So if you're setting up an LLC, you're specifically setting that up for certain reasons to keep it separate and apart from you. You may be the only owner, and for tax filing purposes, we'll find out later on that the income may be reported by you, but that is a separate entity, and that's why Kristen outlines many of the individual filing requirements. And the activity and income of any LLC flows through to its members and are reported on their individual tax return, unless they make certain federal elections that we'll talk about in a little while. So there's 3 types of LLCs, and they're all determined based on the federal tax treatment. So you can be an LLC taxed as a partnership. That means you have to have at least 2 or more members. That's not the crux of our presentation today, but that is one type of LLC. You can choose to be taxed as a corporation. You would still be a limited liability company registered as such with the Secretary of State. It is the very rarest form because in most cases, if you want to be taxed as a corporation, you would just form a corporation. You wouldn't form an LLC. But it is it is an option that you can do. And then highlighted in yellow here is the crux of our presentation today, the single member LLCs. They're also referred to in many cases as a disregarded entity, and I'm going to stress that that's disregarded for tax purposes because, as we mentioned earlier in the previous slide, they are actually out there. They are separate and apart from its members. But when they talk about disregarded entity, they're talking about tax purposes. So in many cases, we get people who form a single member LLC and think that they are a sole proprietor, but these are 2 distinct entities. So in the middle of our diagram here, you'll see that we talk about similarities, right? So there's 2 similarities between a sole proprietor and a single member LLC. The first is they both file a federal 1040, which includes either a Schedule C if it's a business, a Schedule E if it's rental property, or Schedule F if it's farming income, and they pay their federal taxes on that federal 1040. For state purposes, both a single member LLC and a sole proprietor file a Rhode Island 1040 or a Rhode Island 1040 NR if they're a non-resident, and pay the income taxes based on their federal AGI, which would include that Schedule C or Schedule E or Schedule F income in the calculation of that federal AGI. And they report that for state tax purposes and pay the state income taxes at the individual on your individual income tax return. But as you can see on the screen, there are many more differences than similarities between a single member LLC and a sole proprietor. We've said it, I'll say it one more time, that the entity is separate from its owner for a single member LLC, whereas a sole proprietor, that owner is the entity. There's no distinction. A sole proprietor can register a trade name with a local municipality, but a single member LLC is required to register with the Department of State. And Kristen already explained that whole process to you and what that means. A single member LLC does have limited liability protection. However, a sole proprietor has personal liability for all the debts of the business because, again, that owner is the entity, right? A sole proprietor does not have to formally dissolve their business to close it. Now, they may have to go and unregister the trade name with the municipality. They may have other steps that they have to take, just like a regular business, but they don't have to physically dissolve that business with the Secretary of State. However, a single member LLC has a registration date and it has a dissolution date. And Kristen already stressed to you the importance of dissolving that business. And the last distinction that we'll highlight today is that a single member LLC has that annual charge of $400, and it is filed on a separate tax form, not on the 1040. Kristen highlighted that as well. There is no separate filing requirement or annual charge for a sole proprietor. So here's our checklist. The first item on the checklist was identify characteristics of different types of entities, and we've now succeeded in that first goal. So what specifically are the tax treatments, right? So we talked about the filing of the 1040 to pay income taxes, both federal and state, and that's still a similarity for our tax treatment. At the federal level, there's no separate entity filing requirement for a single member LLC. They just include the income and pay the income tax on that 1040 that we spoke about. But for state purposes, that separate form that Kristen mentioned is a Rhode Island 1065. That's the same form that's used by partnerships, limited liability partnerships, and every other type of LLC. All of those entity types file the Rhode Island 1065, and most of those entity types, including a single member LLC and all other LLCs, pay the $400 charge. Kristen showed you the link on their website to get an FEIN number. For a single member LLC, state regulations do require a federal employer identification number in order for that entity to be identified, separate and apart from an individual and their social security number. So you are required to get a federal employer ID number as a single member LLC. And on the state forms, you would still flow that Rhode Island 1040 and pay the federal AGI, as we mentioned on the previous slide. So checkbox number 2, determine the entity requirements of a single member LLC, that 1065 filing. So now let's talk about specific tax forms and how those forms flow. So we've mentioned the 1040, we've mentioned the 1065, we've mentioned a Schedule C or Schedule E or Schedule F. So we're going to walk through some examples on what those forms look like. So this form here on the screen is the Federal 1040 Schedule C. So the numbers here are made up. They're not real numbers for any business that files with the division. We made up gross receipts of $125,000, a number of expenses that the business had, getting down to a profit of $75,000. So that line 31 on your Schedule C shows the profit of $75,000. That $75,000 comes over to your Schedule C, your Schedule 1 of your 1040. and that total from Schedule 1 comes over to the front page of your 1040. You take your itemized deductions, you'll calculate your taxable income. You're most likely going to have an accountant that files these forms for you. But when a tax preparer prepares taxes, ultimately you as an individual are signing your form. So this is just kind of to show you some of the things to look for to see that your forms are being filed properly. That same 75,000 adjusted gross income there on your screen comes over to your Rhode Island 1040 and is the starting point for your Rhode Island personal income taxes. Again, you take deductions and exemptions, you come down to taxable income and Rhode Island tax due. That same 75,000 is what shows up on your Rhode Island 1065. You can see on the screen, the third bullet there talks about Federal Schedule C, line 31. That's the starting point for your federal taxable income of your Rhode Island return. I've highlighted a few boxes that are important on this return. Checking the correct box, identifying yourself as a single member LLC. You know, Kristen had mentioned on the registration form for the Secretary of State that you didn't have to indicate what type of LLC you were forming. On their documents, that's really an indication. Until you file that first tax return, that first tax return is what is the and how you're actually, how many members you are and such items are what ultimately decides how you're going to be taxed and how you're going to be treated. You should fill out the apportionment schedule. It feeds all the information that will also come over to your personal returns. And the last box that's highlighted on the screen there is the $400 tax due, that annual charge. So those are the forms and the flow of the tax forms for the single member LLC and how they come over. The next topic we want to cover is something that we only started covering recently and trying to bring light to the idea of estimated tax payments. So a lot of people that form a new business don't realize that forming a new business may still subject you to filing and making estimated payments. So as an employee, I work for the state. I get every pay period when I get my paycheck, my employer withholds taxes on my income taxes, and they will provide that withholding. They'll put it into their withholding account, the withholding account with the state, identified, right, as withholding for me. And then when I get my W-2 at the end of the year, the employer tells me how many taxes were withheld, and that is my estimated payments. Those are the payments that are made as I'm making income for my behalf. As a business, if you have an annual liability greater than $250, you would be required to make those estimated payments yourself. So as a single member LLC, you would still have to make payments to the state, both and also to the federal government. So those are called a pay-as-you-go system. That's what income taxes are, whether it's taxes withheld out by an employer or whether that's estimated payments made by an individual. So we're going to walk through some examples in a few minutes, but a couple of points. The easiest thing to do if you're trying to make estimated payments, the safe harbor is to pay 100% of the tax that you owe last year. You pay that in 44 installments. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But if your estimated payments equal 100% of your liability from the year before, you'll be safe. If you don't make the correct amount of estimated payments, you could be subject to underestimated interest. In theory, to also be safe, sorry about that, you could pay 80% of your current liability. And I'm going to show you how to calculate that in a minute. But ultimately, the easiest thing and the thing that most people do, the easiest way to remember is 100% of your prior year liability is what you would pay in estimated payments. When you get the presentation, the link here on the screen does link to a video that the IRS has done that talks about estimated payments and why they're important. So let's look at an example. So I had a business in 2021. I made $65,000 in profit for my business. I have the same existing business in 2022. We did a little better. We made $85,000. So what you'll see on the screen here is my liability on line 8 was $1,939 after deductions and exemptions, getting to my taxable income. My 100% liability, my liability was $1,939. For 2022, with making $85,000 in income and profit, my Rhode Island tax due was $2,707. So going into 2022 is I'm having to make estimated payments because I know I owed taxes the year before. Generally, I have to pay either 100% of last year or 80% of the current year. In this case, as long as I take that $1,939, divided by 4 and make my 4 estimated payments, I'm covered. I don't owe underestimated interest. I will have to pay the balance, right? I will have to pay the difference between my estimated payments of $1,939 and my 2002 liability of $2,707, but I won't be charged underestimated interest, okay? So let's take a new business, right? In 2021, I made $75,000 as a new of wages as an employee. Okay, my employer withheld $3,000, so I got a refund. Great. In 2022, I decided to go out and go into business for myself. My federal AGI was the same. I didn't make any less money on working on my own than I did from wages from my employer. So my liability went down a little bit in 2022 to $2,301 because the exemptions and deductions went up. Because I got a refund doesn't mean I didn't have a liability for 2021. It meant that the taxes withheld were greater than my liability. So my liability in 2021, the amount of taxes I owed on income was $2,314. For 2020, in order to not be subject to underestimated interest, the safe harbor number for me to make for estimated payments for 22 is $2,314. Now, I would be safe if I paid 80% of the $2,301 in 2022 liability, if I paid $1,841, but the safe number and the easy number that most people will use is take that $2,314 divided by 4, make those estimated payments over the 4 quarters, which we'll talk about those due dates in a few minutes. And then I would have been overpaid by $13 when I filed my 2022 taxes. Just to finish up estimated payments, there is a worksheet on the estimated payment form that you could use to help you calculate how much those estimated payments would be. Those payments are generally paid in 4 equal installments. You can, if you're a seasonal business, annualize it, but sometimes that can get a little complicated. So the easiest way is to make 4 equal installments. You can create an account on our taxpayer portal and actually schedule those ahead of time. The one last thing I just want to mention that as part of your estimated payments on your federal return, you are paying something called self-employment taxes. And those self-employment taxes include your contribution to Social Security. So if you're not properly reporting your income and you're not properly paying those taxes and those estimates, you're not also contributing to Social Security when you do attempt to retire. So just keep that in mind. So our next checkbox is checked. Individual requirements for the member of the single member LLC. Due dates. So the Rhode Island 1065, as Kristen mentioned, for a single member LLC is due April 15th. Same date as the Rhode Island 1040 that the members would have to file. And the estimated payments, those 4 estimated payments there on your screen, it's April 15th, June 15th, September 15th, and then January 15th of the following year is your 4th estimate. So if we're talking about 2024, that 4th estimate is January 15th of 2025 before you file your 2024 taxes due April 15th of 2025. So now we've checked our 4th box, determined the filing and due dates that apply to your entity. Kristen, I'm going to stop there for a second. I know the last time we covered estimated payments, we got a lot of questions on it. Do we have anything in the chat that would be good to answer as a group, or?
Leo, what happened is in the chat is you got a standing ovation for the awesome explanation you gave about estimated payments. So, if anybody has any questions about estimated payments, certainly put those in the chat. We can address them, but it was an excellent explanation, and there's nothing lingering in the chat on that right now.
Great, great. We just tried to be clear because, you know, the estimated payments is something important. The idea of voluntary compliance and the idea of what we're trying to present here is for a business to not get behind, right? When a business gets behind on their taxes, that's when it starts to get scary, and that's when people start owing interest and penalties, and they start getting worried about their future. And what we're trying to do by this voluntary compliance and these slides, and hopefully giving you the resources when this presentation is done to look at, is to take away some of that that fear.
Leo, so you do know this question was coming because I emailed you telling you the question was coming, but what if I'm still an employee, right? And I have a side hustle. What should I do for estimated payments? Because I am making extra income.
So what you would do, Gabby, is that you would actually add the wage income and your self-employment income together. And that's what you would use to add in this estimated payment form. So that modified federal AGI would include your wages and your side hustle income, okay? So that federal AGI, if we were to go back just a couple screens for a minute, that federal AGI, if you look, is here, line 11, and wages is line 1A, right? So when you get on your federal form, if you are, say you're married and your spouse has wages, so maybe it's not just a side hustle, maybe it's your spouse has wages and you have a job, you have a business. Those estimated payments would be based on both incomes together, okay? So that's where this form, the federal form, includes all of your wages, and that federal AGI number is the number that starts here on line 1 of that tax form. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you, Leo.
Okay, great. All right, so let's go on to some key points to take away before we get into some other tax items, okay? So all LLCs are required to file with the Division of Taxation. The type of LLC determines a required form. Most LLCs, unless they elect that corporation status that we talked about that is very rare to do, would file that Rhode Island 1065. All LLCs that don't elect that corporate taxation, including single member LLCs, are subject to a $400 annual charge. That form is the Rhode Island 1065. We talked about state and federal requirements differing, so make sure that you're aware of the state requirements. A single member LLC and a sole proprietor are not the same. The activity of an LLC does flow through to its members and is reportable to the Division of Taxation on that Rhode Island 1065, the prescribed form. And as I mentioned in the chat to someone before I started speaking, the appendix at the end of this presentation does give some information on other types of LLCs and other entity types. So you can certainly check that if you're thinking about taking on a partner and forming an LLC as a partnership, or maybe forming an S Corp instead. So let's talk about some sales tax requirements. A sales tax permit is required for every business that is making sales at retail. So sales at retail are any sale, lease, or rental of tangible personal property, any sale of pre-written computer software, any sale of specified digital products, or any taxable services. So just because you're selling a product, though, that's not taxable, or you're selling a product that's for resale, or you're selling a product that's for wholesale, it's not whether a product is taxable or not that requires a sales permit. It's whether you're selling a product at retail. That's it. The sales tax permit is renewed on an annual basis. It is required to be renewed on an annual basis. But there is no longer a fee starting with June of 2022. There is no fee to take out a sales permit, and there is no fee to renew a sales tax permit. The link, when you get the presentation, the link to complete the business application and registration on our website will be there. There is also a link there to the sales and use tax page of our website. The current sales tax rate is 7%. Returns are the Rhode Island STR, which is the sales tax return, is due monthly or quarterly, depending on your average monthly sales tax amount. If your sales tax is, if monthly, the average sales tax you remit to the state is $200 or more, you would be a monthly filer. If it's less than $200 per month, you could qualify to be a quarterly filer. But when you initially take out your business application and registration, you will be set up as a monthly filer for the first 6 months. And if your sales are if you are selling goods that are not taxable, say like clothing, for the sake of you're selling T-shirts and other clothing, you still must file 0 returns even if you don't owe any sales tax. So now we have our sales permit. We know how often we have to file our sales taxes. But how do we know if something's taxable or not? I would actually tell you the way the law is structured. The real question you should be asking is what's not taxable. If you're selling tangible personal property, something that can be held, weighed, measured, felt, it's taxable unless the statute exempts it. Okay, so we listed some examples of some taxable goods on the screen. There is a link directly to every exemption that's listed in the statute. For example, clothing under $250 is exempt. That doesn't mean if I go to the store and I buy 5 pairs of jeans, and Those 5 pairs of jeans come to $275. All of a sudden, the store's going to charge me tax. It's one individual item for $250. So if you buy a pair of pants and a pair of shirt and a shirt, it's not the items combined, it's one individual item. Some other examples are items that are from manufacturing, items that are for resale or wholesale. There are some exemptions related to farming. There's a lot of different exemptions out there, but the gist is the default under the statute is if you're selling tangible goods, they're taxable. So there are a few services that are taxable as well, taxi cab and ride share. So if you're using an Uber or a Lyft or those types of services, those are subject to tax. Pet care services are a taxable service, and some of the others that are listed on the screen there. Some other taxes for you to be aware of. What's on the screen there is a snapshot, a snippet of our business application and registration form and some of the taxes that are administered there. Withholding taxes require a business application. Local meals and beverage tax. So that's very similar to sales tax, but it's specifically on the food service industry. And eating and drinking, something called an eating and drinking establishment. That meals and beverage tax goes back to the city and town. But that's also a tax that requires a business application and registration form. Tobacco tax, cigarette dealer's tax, so that's a retailer selling cigarettes, and hotel tax. So one additional point we want to stress is there are certain types of taxes that are called trust funds. So trust fund taxes are exactly what they sound like. They are taxes that a business will collect from someone else, and they hold them in trust for the state, and then they would remit those taxes over to the state on the due date required. So some examples of that are sales tax, hotel tax, meals and beverage tax, withholding tax, where those are collected from someone else, held by the business, and remitted over to the state. So links to the statute are there if you want it. The division does put out newsletters on a quarterly basis. And there's a link to a newsletter here that goes into a little more details about trust funds and what they are. But let's talk about a couple of examples, okay? As a business, you're required to collect sales tax from your customer. All the sales tax collected has to be remitted to the Division of Taxation by the 20th of the following month. So that's a monthly filer. And the retail sales tax relates to the fact that a business is collecting that tax from their customer, who is the ultimate taxpayer. So it's the customer who's paying the tax to the state through the business who's required to collect it. That's held in trust. Okay? Withholding taxes is the same thing, except the employer is withholding those taxes from their employees' wages. They're required to withhold based on the income the employee makes, and they are remitting that tax over to the state, held in trust. So in both those cases, those funds are not available for the business to use, the employer or the retailer. So the law does require any trust funds to be remitted over to the state without exception. There are specific penalties around the misappropriation of trust funds and use of those trust funds for the personal business. A business owner can be held personally responsible for misappropriating trust funds. So why do we put this out there? I'm not trying to scare you today. What I want you to do is if you're running a business, is be aware that there are implications of doing the wrong thing with trust funds. And we want to help you not go down the wrong path, not get behind on those taxes. So some additional resource on some of these slides. You can find that there are resources for businesses on our website. You can use the links that are here directly to link to the, specifically to the different types of taxes on our website. One of the most important links I can tell you that's available on our website and in this presentation is contact us. If you have a question about a particular tax, you can email directly to our sections. Most of our sections have, in most cases, a 24-hour turnaround on the 1 business day, 24 hours turnaround on response time on emails. You don't have to sit on the phone. You don't have to wait. During busy periods, it may be 48 hours, but we do our best to get back to a taxpayer as quickly as possible. And the email is the easiest way to do that. So now we have checked the 5th box in our checkbox list. Find the information and resources you need on our website. Just a couple more pieces of resources. We have put out there for taxpayers on our website something called compliant taxpayer profiles. Depending on the industry you're in and depending on the type of entity you have, this can be a one-stop shop for you to determine your due dates and what keeps you in good standing with the Division of Taxation. Link to all of the compliant taxpayer profiles for the 7 or 8 industries we have available is there on the screen as well. So you can click on that link when you get the presentation. We also want to give you some resources for record keeping. We have a whole list here of suggestions for you, but you also can click on, we have a printable version of a guide that you can look at. And we're also linking you to the federal guidance on record keeping, so that you make sure that you keep the records that all the records you should have. Ultimately, the longest, the suggested length of time to keep records is at least 7 years. It gets you beyond any statute of limitations, both at the federal and state level. So keeping records for 7 years is what's usually recommended. Amanda Taroki is on today. She's one of the people who's helping monitor, and she does produce a newsletter. We send out advisories. You can get those directly to your inbox. Hopefully you won't think of it like junk mail, like so much of the other emails that we all get on a regular basis. But if you just go to our website, right on the home page on the bottom right, you'll see that blue box that's there on your screen. All you have to simply do is put in your email address, click sign up, and you'll get all of our newsletters and advisories that we send out with information for taxpayers to be aware of. You can also, if you're QR code savvy, use your camera and click on the QR code and it'll bring you right to the front page to be able to enter that information. A lot of the information today is covered by these 3 sections. So you can certainly click on the contact us link as I suggested, but you can also use the contact information here on your screen to call or email any of those sections. And with that, I dumped a lot of information at you, but hopefully it was good information, and we can take maybe a few minutes, Kristen, if you see, or Gabby, if you guys see anything out there that we should address live.
Yeah, thank you so much, Leo. So there's a number of things that you covered in your presentation that folks are just looking for kind of like a repeat. So I'm gonna say some things in my own words and you tell me if I'm wrong, okay?
Okay.
We'll play a little game here. Okay.
Can I tell you if should I tell you if you're right too?
No, I don't need the validation. It's okay. All right, so I have a business. I am selling a product. Doesn't matter what it is. I'm selling something. I'm physically handing this item to a customer or I am shipping it to a customer in Rhode Island in exchange for money, I need a retail sales permit, no matter whether that item is taxable or not.
Correct.
Okay. So for services, this only applies if my services are taxable. So if I am selling taxable services, I need a retail sales permit. If my services are not taxable, if they're exempt from sales tax, I do not need to get a retail sales permit.
Correct. If I'm a tax preparer, just preparing taxes, providing that service, if I'm a consultant, just providing tax consultation or business financial consultation, I'm not providing taxable service. I do not need a sales permit. So
And if my business,
the list there on the screen before
Mhm.
was the list that would cover the taxable services.
Perfect. And
As
if
of today.
business does a combination of these things, I sell services that are not taxable, but I also sell stuff, I've got to get that retail sales permit.
Correct.
Okay. Fantastic. I love getting things right, even though you don't have to tell me that I'm right. Secondly, sales tax returns. So I am filling out that bar form. I am getting a retail sales permit. I now have a sales tax account. At least for those first 6 months, I have to file monthly sales tax returns, even if I haven't sold anything during that.
Correct.
Okay.
Or even if you've sold a million things, you're gonna file monthly for those first 6 months at the very least. You may sell a million t-shirts in that 6 months, and all those t-shirts are non-taxable. But for the first 6 months, you're gonna be monthly, and all your goods that you're selling are non-taxable, so you're gonna file 6-0 returns.
And if that's the case for me and my monthly sales tax obligation is less than $200, after that 6 months, I can apply to the Division of Taxation to pay less frequently.
Yep. Reach out to our excise tax section. They would be on that contact us page. They were also one of the email addresses that were there on the screen. And that would be where you would be able to get the information.
Perfect. Okay. $1,000,000 question, Leo, and I know it's one that you can answer, but I want everyone to hear it. What if I don't know if my stuff is taxable or not? What do I do?
So first step, reach out to our excise tax section. You can click on the link in the presentation, right, that actually physically had, we'll go back to it, the list of exemptions here, and see if your product is listed in that list of exemptions. And then you can still email the division and get confirmation of that, or you can reach out to our excise tax section for guidance.
And I am assuming when I'm emailing tax.excise@tax.ri.gov to ask if my products or services are taxable, I should probably not use hypotheticals and I should be super duper specific. Is that right?
That is correct. The issue that we find is that we need to have as many details as possible in order to accurately answer whether it's taxable or not. Sometimes, unfortunately, I guess unfortunately, the slightest change to the circumstances can change whether something is taxable or not. A food item, food and food ingredients, generally, when you go into a grocery store, food and food ingredients generally is not taxable. But if that grocery store has a takeout area where they prepare food and make things that you can eat on premises, that may change the circumstance of that item being taxable or not. So being as specific as possible, and knowing that we may ask additional questions, and certainly we refrain as much as possible from answering hypotheticals, because hypotheticals could lead to more questions.
That makes perfect sense to me. Okay. I also just wanted to make a really bland general statement that I think is correct. And we had a lot of questions in the chat when you were talking about the minimum annual charge. for a single member LLC. And I have elected to be taxed as such. So I am a pass-through entity. I am paying income taxes on the money I'm bringing in through this LLC on my personal income tax return. I am also filing a separate tax return for just the LLC with the LLC's EIN, and on that tax return, I am paying the $400 charge.
Correct. So in our forms, and when I walk through the forms, you're looking like, and you're reporting the income twice, right? But you're not paying the income tax twice. That $400 charge is due whether I make $1 million, whether I lose $1 million, as Kristen said before, whether I do business, I don't do business. It's basically a charge for existence, right? Is a way to look at it. However, if you make money or you lose money, that flows through to your personal income tax. So if you actually made $1 million, congratulations. The state of Rhode Island is happy for you. Keep making $1 million, but that is subject to personal income taxes.
Okay, and this question was not asked in the chat, but it is one that we hear, and I know you hear kind of frequently. I have a business, I am selling stuff, but I only sell at like farmers markets during the summer. Do I have to get that retail sales permit?
So the farmer's market sometimes can get tough. In general, you should get the sales tax permit, because whether you're selling at multiple farmers markets or you're only doing it seasonally, whatever it is, that's it. You're still making sales at retail. There are certain circumstances, and it's not really farmers markets, but there are certain circumstances that are very particular where there might be a separate permitting process, but that would not apply to farmers markets, and it does not apply when you're making sales at retail on a regular basis. If you think you have questions about whether you should have a sales tax permit or not, reach out and ask. But even at a farmer's market, or you're traveling between farmers markets or whatever that might be, you're still the one making those retail sales.
Okay, and how about if I am selling online and I sell all over the country? I am on an Etsy or something like that. Some of my customers are going to be in Rhode Island. Some of them are going to be in Iowa and Michigan and Germany. Do I charge Rhode Island sales tax for all of those sales?
No, but here's where the complication starts, right? So, and Kristen, I think we cover this in another workshop that we do a little bit called Hobby to Business that we partner with you on. That I don't think is scheduled yet, but I'm sure we are in the works of talking through that one as well. When you're making retail sales online, if that sale is made to a Rhode Island customer, you have to charge Rhode Island tax. If that sale is made to another state, you may, depending on your volume, have to determine and know the laws to that state. Almost every state has a threshold. So for Rhode Island, it's the threshold of sales is 100,000 into the state. Now, if you're selling from Rhode Island to Rhode Island, there's no threshold. Don't misconstrue my statement. But if you're selling from Florida into Rhode Island, if you make more than $100,000 worth of sale, you have to charge that tax and remit that tax. Okay. However, if you are charging if you're selling to Florida, Florida has no sales tax, so that's not the greatest example, right? But if you're selling to Connecticut, depending on the volume of sales, you may have to know the Connecticut requirements. So sales online, just have to be careful. You don't want to put yourself into a bad spot.
Thank you so much. And there's a question in the chat that I just want to account for here. And yeah, I was just gonna say the question is, how can the state make sure that new folks registering new businesses understand the requirements about the annual report requirement and the deadline and the fee and the minimum annual charge requirement and the deadline and the fee? And I think the answer is we're doing it. We're here, we're doing that. We also have on both of our websites all of this information available. There's ways to contact us. We have newsletters. There are lots of channels where you can connect with the state. The website that I showed during my portion of the presentation, where we lay out all of those requirements, that's been there for almost 5 years now. Before that, the information was there, not as neat and pretty, but it was there. But it's been there for some time. There's also all sorts of opportunities for you to get email notifications and to get resources from our offices. You just have to participate, right? Right? It's there. It's there for you to read, for you to access. We also make a lot of efforts to make these things available in more than just English. So if you're more comfortable digesting this information in Spanish, we're making that available for you. We're doing the best that we possibly can to get the message out there for you. But the fact of the matter is, we are dealing with statutory requirements that we have to administer. Our offices are not creating these requirements because we want to make your lives more difficult. I promise. It makes our lives a little more difficult to administer the programs too. But we are trying our level best to make it clear what the requirements are at the start of your business so that you don't find yourself flat-footed 5 or 6 years down the line having never known about it. So we are really trying very, very hard to do so. I hope that we have made it a lot easier to do so. But you know, if there are suggestions that we can take back, then by all means, please feel free to get in touch with our offices.
Yeah, and I think even more so than getting out there as much as we can. You know, I just saw one of the last things in the chat. Absolutely biggest takeaway is reach out to either of us, right? Either of our departments, because we're more than willing to help you. We're out here in order to reach out, in order to help you voluntarily comply and get you as much information as possible. So, certainly, you know, starting a business is tough. It has to be something that you are willing to do, but you also have to be willing to look for the resources, and we'll certainly give you any resources that we can.
And we should also mention that we partner with a lot of nonprofit organizations all across the state that offer more hands-on guidance for actually like running your business and putting together a marketing plan and all of those things that the state is really not the expert on. So if you find yourself stranded, you're lost, you don't really know what to do, we can certainly explain what we're responsible for, but we can also help connect you to other resources around the state. So I know we're the government, and it's not always a comfortable thing to say, "Hi, government, I'm looking for help," but that's what we're here for. That is what we are trying to do. So please, absolutely do feel free to reach out to both of our offices. Our contact information is readily available. We all have multiple channels by which you can reach us, and we really want you to. All of us would much rather you ask the question and get an answer than guess, because it means a lot more effort on your part to have to do something after to fix something that you didn't correctly understand when you first did it. It's just a pain for you and no fun for anybody.
Yep.
Perfect. Gabby, did you have any lingering questions? I was reading the chat. It looks like all of the questions have really been been addressed. If there are questions that are relate to like, is this taxable? Is this not taxable? You really want to reach out with details to that email address that the sales tax section at tax with all of those details like Leo mentioned. If you have questions about your particular LLC registration, reach out to Gabby, reach out to me, reach out to our email address. And we will be happy to give you really specific guidance on those questions that relate to your particular case. Did I talk over you, Gabby? Go ahead.
You did not talk over me. You know how my brain works. So I might bring up something that opens a little bit of a can of worms. So Leo, you just tell me if you'd rather leave that can closed for tonight. We had a question.
We already answered a lot of Kristen's hypotheticals, I think. We'll try for one more. Go ahead, Gabby.
Okay, well, we had a question about filing electronically, and I'm actually not going to ask the question verbatim because I just am more interested actually in hearing the out loud answer, even though I know part of the answer, right? As to like filing corporate returns electronically. So can they be filed electronically? How do we use the tax portal to file things electronically when we can?
So signing up for the tax portal does allow you to file most of our forms electronically. However, corporate returns, personal income tax returns, those types of things are only filed electronically through a software vendor. So for me, for example, right, I buy a tax software myself to prepare my taxes, and that software allows me to file electronically, both federal and state. In most cases, you're going to go to a tax preparer, and that tax preparer is going to prepare your taxes and file them electronically. I showed you the forms because I think it's important for you as a business owner to know what you're looking at and know what you're signing, because you are signing those forms, as I mentioned. But in most cases, your taxes, when you're a business, you're going to go to a preparer. Now, as Kristen said, depending on your income and your level of business, there are nonprofits and there are other resources available to you. You don't have to pay a tax preparer. But also be aware that paying a tax preparer or paying an attorney may be part of being in business. It may be something that you want to consider to protect yourself, right? And that tax preparer gets paid to do that. So generally corporate returns, and the long-winded answer, Gabby, to you is corporate returns and personal returns usually have to go through a software. They're not available on our portal. Almost every other tax type that we file is available on the portal.
Thank you, Leo. And just to hone in on the 1065, right? We cannot file that on the portal.
You cannot. That would be through software. Yep.
Through software, or also we can do it paper, right? We can mail it or hand it in.
So you can do it paper, but be aware that there is electronic filing mandate for large businesses in Rhode Island. We didn't get into that too much today, but we do have a large business is a business that who has over $100,000 in gross receipts, or has tax liability for all tax types to the division of more than 5,000. So that's not really that large of a business, right? So although you can file on paper, if you meet that large business registrant, you are required to pay electronically.
Thank you, Leo. And just also for the taxpayer portal, can you talk a little bit about linking certain accounts, like sales tax accounts and your corporate accounts?
Yeah, so the best thing to do is to set up a tax portal account, you can create anyone can create a login ID and a password. Once you create that login and password, you would reach out to our tax portal section. Okay, so that was the contact info on one of those slides at the end. And that tax portal group can issue you a PIN notice. So what that PIN notice does, it allows you to link your login to your accounts that you've registered with the division. Once you do that, you have access to all of your account information on the portal.
Thank you, Leo. Those are all my questions for now. Thanks.
Good.
Okay, great. So we made it through. Somehow we got through 2 hours of talking about single member LLCs. I hope you learned something. I hope you learned a lot of some things. Just as a reminder, we will be sending a copy of the recording to everyone. You'll also get a copy of the slides that Leo used. You'll get some links to some of the things that I showed you on our website, like that welcome packet, other things as well. You know how to get in touch with us. Again, we want to encourage you to do that. We really want to thank you for sitting with us. Leo, Amanda, Carlita, I want to thank you guys for all of your support today, for being excellent ambassadors for the great work that the Rhode Island Division of Taxation does, and for helping us out with this presentation, because we quite literally couldn't do it without you. It might shock you to hear that I'm not a tax expert somehow, despite all of my best efforts. So that will be it for us this evening. Again, I want to thank you all for coming so much. We're going to stop the recording, and we will close out the evening. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your night, everybody. Take care.